Hello, and welcome to this workshop, Balance for Midlife Men. My name is Stephen Locke, and I am a professional executive leadership and personal coach based out of the UK. We're going to be together for around about 20 minutes today while I talk you through some ideas that should help you in this phase of your life. Just so you're aware, the way that these things work, you can see me, hopefully, but I can't see you. However, if you post comments underneath the stream on LinkedIn, I can see those comments, and then I can also answer any questions that you have that way at the end of my presentation. So I'm going to talk to you about some ideas, and then I will stay around for a few moments to answer any questions as well. So you are very, very welcome, and I hope you find something really useful in this today. So shall we dive in? Well, here we go. So when we're talking about balance, there are many, many different ways of thinking about this. The classic idea is work-life balance, isn't it? Those of you that follow me on LinkedIn will know that that's not one of my favorite ways to think about balance. But this is what we're going to do today. We're going to go really big, and then we're going to bring it right down to this moment. We're going to start with a lifetime, then a decade, a year, a season, a week, a day, an hour, and then right back into now. And I'm going to give you different ways of thinking about balance at these different phases and stages of life. So first of all, let's look at balance over a lifetime. The reason that I mention this is that many of the people that I work with are in what you might call the middle part of life. Most of my clients are somewhere between 35 and 60 years of age. And why is that? That's because they are moving through a different phase in their life, and they realize that they need some help. So on here's one way of thinking about this. We have the foundational years, then we have some years when we're exploring who we are, trying to find our ambition in life. Then we start to establish a career and a family. We're building and establishing a name for ourselves, and also all the practical things that we need in our life, like mortgages and houses and cars and everything else. Then we move into a phase that we might call being a midlife provider. And many of you, that is where you will be today. And you're balancing the responsibilities of providing for others, keeping a roof over your head, making sure that you're contributing to pensions and all the rest of it, with all the other things that you want to do in your life as well. And then maybe a little bit later on in life, we move to a different phase where we start to, maybe our children leave home and we start to reassess who we are. It's really, really important to think about this, because we can get a little bit locked into thinking that we should always be exploring and having ambition. And of course, we can do all of these things at different phases of life. But as you will find from speaking to your friends and colleagues, often as we move in this transition through the middle part of life, it is hard. It's difficult to do all of the things that we need to do. And we get to question it at some point and start to reflect on who we are and who we want to be for these later phases of life. And with that in mind, there are different challenges. The first way that we looked at this was reasonably optimistic, but there are challenges to this as well. And in the building and establishing phase, if that's where you are right now, maintaining some kind of balance between your work, your career, and all of the increasing responsibilities that you have around children and maybe childcare, and then clubs and looking after everything, without neglecting your personal well-being or the relationships that you need to sustain yourself. That is not easy. And so if you find yourself in that place, be kind to yourself and maybe pay attention to some of the things that I'm going to tell you later on. If you've moved on a little bit from that and you're more in that middle part, you're in the routine of providing, that pressure can be really, really big. It's particularly acute, and it can show up in the stress statistics for men in the middle part of life. So if you find yourself there, it can be genuinely difficult to move through this phase of life without neglecting yourself. And we hear the classic thing of the midlife crisis. It's usually a reassessment, really. It's a reassessment of identity. It's a reassessment, maybe an opportunity to refine who we are. But wherever you are on this path, the point is you really do need to look after yourself. If you don't do that, then you won't be able to show up and be all of these things. You won't be able to build. You won't be able to establish yourself. You won't be able to be a provider. And one way of thinking about that, one lens, is to think about balance. And that's what we're going to continue to talk about in different ways. And this is the one that I think is one of the most powerful things to think about. particularly if we're on that kind of treadmill of providing and building. This is a quote that I love from a hero of mine, Rich Roll, from the Rich Roll podcast. Most of us massively overestimate what we can do in a year and wildly underestimate what we can do in a decade. And I've found this to be so true. There have been phases of my life when I wished that I could change my circumstances, and I wanted to do that quickly. But the truth is, big fundamental changes, like in my case, for instance, I had a successful career. I was a national head in part of the health service in the UK. And making the transition from realizing that that wasn't going to be how I wanted to spend the later part of my career into doing what I do now took a lot of time. But if I look back over what has been a 3.5 year process, what I have achieved in that time is absolutely enormous. But it happened in tiny little increments, and it happened by setting a goal that was sufficiently far in the future that I had time to evolve, change, learn, make mistakes, and adapt. So do not underestimate what you can do in a decade, and don't get frustrated with what you can do in a day or a month or a year. If you are going to try and find balance over a decade, it's really, really important that you set good goals, that those goals are meaningful to you, that they are going to genuinely create a sense of fulfillment and satisfaction in your life, and also do the things that you need to do to provide for your family, to provide for your future and everything else as well. Now, an issue with the way that we often set goals is that we start in the wrong place. I'm a professional coach. For the most part, when you approach a coach, the first question they're going to ask you is, what are your goals? Because that's how the coaching process works. But I think there's actually a step that you need to really spend some time on first, and that is get to know yourself. And thinking back to the phases of life, who you are in this phase of life and who you want to be in the next phase of life might be very different to who you were when you were 18 or 19 and you were making choices in your education that led to the career that you have today. So take time. Typically, when I take people through this process, we spend at least a month just helping people to understand, who am I in this phase of life, and therefore who do I want to be, and what goals are going to get me to that place. Once you've been through that process and you've really understood yourself and taken the time and the opportunity to reflect, then you will set goals that genuinely fill you up, that you will be motivated to work on over a decade, motivated to work on week in, week out until you achieve what it is that you want to achieve. After that, then you can get ready to actually do that. This is the classic stuff that many of you will be, if you're in business or in big organizations, you'll know about managing projects. You'll know about how you set the stages. You'll know about how you go about that kind of thing. But first of all, you need to know who you really are, set goals that are genuinely meaningful to you, and then get ready to act. After that, the delivery part, frankly, is the easy bit, because you will know exactly why it is you're doing what you're doing. You will get up every single day with a sense of motivation and drive to do what it is that you really want to do. So that's a decade. What about a year? Never underestimate the power of seasons. And it's really, really useful, I think, to think about this in this moment. Where I stand here today, the schools have gone back just today, most of them. And that means that the feeling of summer is coming to an end. And for those of us like myself who work for ourselves, we rely on selling things into companies or onboarding people into programs and things like that. August is a really interesting month because we're here and we're working and we're trying to generate activity and interest, but the rest of the world has gone to sleep, which is good. They should have gone to sleep, not gone to sleep exactly, but gone into a restful period in the summer. Using the longer days, using the chance to catch up with family and friends, to do things outdoors is a really, really important thing to do in the summer. And as I, by the way, I am slightly self-mocking. I haven't been sat around desperately hoping that everybody would come back from their holidays. I've used the time as well because you can't fight against it. But you will all also notice that as of the last day or two, your inbox will be starting to fill up, and it certainly will in the next few days. People will start to get back to you. Meetings will get booked, plans will get made, and that's totally natural in the autumn. So my encouragement here is to think about your life in terms of seasons. In the winter, maybe that's a time for deeper introspection, and that's okay. We are not machines that can run 24/7 all of the time. So tune into the season that you are in and what that means for what you can and can't realistically expect from yourself and from the people around you as well. There are also some real, genuine differences that happen with the different seasons. So you get physical health variations. So I'm sure many of you will be aware, I'm very attuned to the fact that in kind of January and February, I have lower energy. I struggle, and whether that's a physiological thing related to the shorter days, or it's a cyclical thing, or it's to do with seasonal viruses and things like that, I'm not sure. But I've learnt over time that to anticipate and expect that, and to be kind to myself in a physical sense. January is not the time for me to be pushing on a big physical goal. So pay attention to that. Also, you get emotional shifts, and many people will suffer from finding it a little bit harder as the days get shorter, particularly where I am in the north of England, and if you're any further north as well, you will find that you do get emotional shifts, and you get an opening up in the springtime as well. You get optimism and things like that. These things are real. Resources change. In my case, I've already alluded to this a little bit. From me as a freelance worker, there are times of the year when there are opportunities really to sell things into corporates, and there are times when there are not. You simply can't make it be a season that it isn't. And really importantly as well, there are cultural and social cycles. And if we get too locked into the idea of a productivity mindset, we think that we can kind of always be maximizing every day, in every week, in every month, in every season. That's not really the way that it works, is it? You try pushing something in the week between Christmas and January in the UK, and you're not going to get very far. So why not anticipate that? See where you are within the season, within the year, and work with that. And if that means you are encouraged to take a break, take a break. That's okay. Throughout the course of a year and then a decade, you will achieve your goals if you can keep yourself in a good sense of balance. So try not to work against the rhythms of the seasons. We are not machines. We cannot be productive all of the time in exactly the same way. So don't think about that. Your human body needs to be connected to your community. That means these celebrations that we have at different times, to your family, and to everything else that is around you, to nature as well. So keep that in mind. And one more thought or two about seasons. A season is a natural rhythm. And I don't think it is an accident that we are attuned to the changing of the sun in the sky and the weather as it shifts from autumn to winter to spring to summer. We are attuned to that. And so it's a business quarter, it's an academic term, an agricultural cycle, it's a fitness training cycle. If anybody's ever signed up for a marathon or anything like that, you'll see that actually it's a 3-month program that you sign up for. And it's a really good period for habit formation. So as we record this here today at the start of September, we're about to move into a new season, a new quarter. It's a great time. What are your goals? How are you going to improve yourself? What is it you want to achieve over the next 3 months? Brilliant. Set yourself a midterm goal and go for it. It's fantastic. Set one that works with the rhythm of the season as well, and you will give yourself even more chance of success. So that's a season. And what about a week? Well, I've alluded to this a couple of times, but we can't run at full pace all of the time. Machines are fantastic, and AI is amazing because it doesn't really matter what time of day it is it? If you can make sure that it has the right inputs, it's going to churn and it's going to give you results. But we're not like that, and we don't want to be like that. So if you, many of the clients that I work with, they have helpfully picked up on some good advice on habit formation and how to be productive, and they come to me with journals, and they've got sequences of things that they really think they ought to be doing every morning, these habits, I ought to do this, and then I'll do that, and then I'll do this, and then I'll do that, and then I'll take the kids to school. Well, maybe if you're in that very early phase of life, if you're in your 20s, you can do that kind of thing. It's fantastic. But if you're in the middle part of life and you have obligations and you have careers and you have children and you have potentially elderly relatives that you need to help, that doesn't really work. So I much prefer to think about how you can get the right sort of pace and the right sort of rhythm in a week. And here's just some examples of how you can do that. The first one is to just set yourself a small amount of time for a weekly review and reflection. And don't make that just about productivity. Allow yourself to sit with a journal and say, what would I really like to do in the next week? What's my priority? How am I feeling? Where's my energy? What's important? What's bothering me? What's exciting me? Allow yourself to review how you are showing up at the moment and what you would like to do for the next week. Then set yourself some priorities and make sure that you leave plenty of space. We never achieve everything on our to-do list, do we? So accept that. What are the things that are the most important for you this week? When you look at your calendar, if you see it's full of meetings, don't also think that you can fill it with productivity. Allow yourself to say, being good in those meetings is my priority for this week. And if you see an empty week, you say, oh, making the most of the time that I've got is my priority for this week. And I would like to make progress on this particular goal. And then the next part is something that I feel is an absolutely wonderful thing. It's the technique called Plan Tomorrow Today. And it's the very simple act of at the end of each day, you sit down with your diary or your notebook or something like that, and you say, what is it that I would like to do tomorrow? And you set yourself some tasks and maybe you prioritize them. This is the most important thing, and then that, and then that. That simple act, I find, makes it much, much easier to relax into the evening and then to sleep better, because I already know what I'm committing to for the next day. And of course, when you wake up, you might find out that something's happened and you can't carry on doing whatever it is that you said you wanted to do, but that's okay, because you will be better rested for anticipating what's going to come and just planning tomorrow today. Also, when you think about balance over a week, I mentioned do not make it just about productivity. In the programs that I take people through, we look and we talk quite a lot about fulfillment and how we can do it. And it's related to concepts like ikigai, which comes from Japan, which is how you find yourself a career or a way of earning a living in the world that gives you real fulfillment. But for me, I'd like to encourage the people that I work with to look at these 5 areas. Make time for yourself, and that is genuinely for yourself. What is it that you need to do to sustain yourself? In my case, that probably means some running, it probably means some meditation, and it might mean watching a film on my own, which is not so easy. I've got 4 children and finding the time to do that. But if I can do that, then I show up better for everybody else. And notice that's nothing to do with work. That's just me for myself, what is going to keep me healthy, what is going to keep me well. If I run, if I exercise, that is a great foundation for me. For somebody else, it might be some painting, it could be something different. But what is it you need to do for yourself? And then what do you need to do for your family? Is that a date night with your wife? Is it a dinner with the family where you all sit together? Is it spending some time with your parents? Whatever it is. And if you don't have a family in that sense, that could be close friends. But it's the people that are important to you. What is it that you're going to make time for them in the next week? Next, community. It's really, really important, and lots of wisdom traditions talk about this, but increasingly like modern psychological sciences and things like that are starting to see the benefits of participating in and giving back, volunteering in some sense to help others. It's really, really important. So the example I like to give here is that if you are a religious person, if you're going to go to church or temple or mosque or something like that, don't just go volunteer to help. Be the person that hands out the Bibles, be the person that helps to make the tea afterwards or something like that. Find a way to be of service. And that doesn't have to be huge numbers or long amounts of time. It's just finding something in that week where you are giving back to your community. That could be an online community, it could be a sports team, it could be anything, but make sure that that is done with intention in each week if you can. Then work. And this comes back to like, what is it you really want to achieve? that is meaningful to you. We all have obligations. We all work for somebody. But what is meaningful to you? What is going to unlock some of your creativity and your passion for whatever it is that you do? And make sure that you have that set with intention in the week. And again, it's not necessarily about the amount of time. It's about showing up for yourself, to give yourself something which contributes and makes you feel like you have meaning and purpose. And finally, the one that we always all ignore, daily practice. We all know that there is something that we should be doing every day that we don't, be that meditation or a walk in the countryside or hugging a tree or prayer or painting or reading a novel or whatever it is. But whatever it is, try and set that intention that you're going to do that regularly every single day. You will find that that really helps you to bring balance into your life. We're getting closer to this present moment, and balance over a day. It's important to recognize that physiologically we move through different phases in a day. So we're not the same person at 7 o'clock in the morning as we are at 9 o'clock at night. And we have different body clocks and so on, but most of us are attuned to go through 3 phases in each day. As men as well, and I think most of the people watching this are going to be men, there is an actual physiological difference with testosterone and other hormonal changes as well. So we tend to go through a daily cycle. Testosterone peaks in the morning and it tails off during the day. We go to sleep, it restores, and the cycle repeats every day. Some people like to say that men are attuned to the cycle of the sun and women are attuned to the cycle of the moon. I don't know how true that is, but there we go. But in terms of the 3 phases, and this is based a lot on the work of Andrew Huberman, of the Huberman Lab, and all those podcasts that you see all over the place. But in the first 8 hours after waking, this is when we're most likely to be alert. You can make the most of that by getting some sunlight, some natural light into your eyes. Doesn't matter if it's overcast, be outside and get some light in your eyes as soon as you can in the morning. For some people, delaying coffee is a good idea. Personally, I've experimented with this. I don't think that makes much difference to me, but skipping breakfast does. I find that if I fast in the morning, I maintain my attention, my focus, and my energy through the day a lot better. But experiment with this. But in those first 8 hours, this is the time when, if you want to set yourself new challenges, create new habits, and do those kinds of things, all of the key alertness chemicals are going to be at their peak in that time. So if you can orient your day around this, that's fantastic. I like to do this. This is when I like to do harder workouts, is in the morning. And I like to, if I am going to be doing some creative work, if I'm creating a new program or something like that, that's when I try to do that in the morning if I can. Then in the 9 to 15 hours after waking, this is when the chemicals that have been making you feel more alert start to tail off. And then you should naturally be in a cycle where you are beginning to gently move yourself into a different phase, eventually towards sleep, which is the 3rd phase. So this is a good point in time for reflection. It's a good time for conversation, and it's a good time for doing things that are going to stimulate your creativity. So enjoying music, taking walks and things like that. Practicing yoga is fantastic. And then finally, the final phase is when we start to move, 16 to 24 hours after we've woken up. That's when we should be thinking about preparing for sleep and then going to sleep. So some really good tips here, making sure that you have any devices outside of the room. Try not to look at them just before you go to sleep. At least ideally for half an hour or so, maybe an hour before that. Try to be in a room that's dark and cool. I found one of the most amazing life hacks ever was to buy a sleep mask, which keeps me genuine darkness through the night, and it's had a huge effect on my sleep and consequently on everything else. But at this point, getting good sleep and getting good rest is essential if you want to learn from everything that's happened to you during the previous day and to be ready to be as effective as you can be the next day. So then we're going to think about the last 2 things, that balance over an hour. And this is where I actually think for the first time you might hear me talking about productivity and intention. One of the most effective techniques you can use for making the most of an hour and getting balance in that hour, and at this stage I'm thinking about a working hour, is to use something called the Pomodoro technique. Pomodoro means tomato in Italian. comes from the idea of those little kitchen timers that you used to get. But it's a really, really simple technique. The idea is you decide what task you're going to do. For example, when I was preparing this presentation for you today, I used this technique. You set the timer for 20 minutes and you dedicate yourself to that task. And that's fully with the attention. There's no checking emails. The phone is turned over and on silent. So you fully dedicate yourself to that task. And then you take a 5-minute break before repeating. But note that break should be a genuine break. It's not go and check my emails, go and scroll Instagram or anything like that. It can actually be helpful to walk away from your desk and try and look at something in the distance. If it's just looking out of the window is fine, or if you can't do that, just looking at something the far side of the room. That change in sense perception and depth perception can really help you to relax your mind a little bit. And then you come back and you repeat the cycle. And you can do, I don't know, maybe 3 Pomodoro cycles, something like that. And you will find that you achieve an awful lot in that time by actually focusing on the right balance between concentrated activity and breaks and rest. So that's the Pomodoro technique, and it's great for getting work done. But I want you to also think about this, and this applies for everything, for work and non-work, for the yoga and everything else that we've mentioned here as well. Is giving your attention to things and to do that with intention and not guilt. So if you're not being productive and you're not, actively working on something, it is fine to be relaxing, watching, sitting, chatting, cooking, listening, reading, playing, or even scrolling. I allow myself from time to time 15 minutes of scrolling Instagram. It's a helpful thing for me to do because I'm one of those people, I'm sure you're as well, that can find an hour goes by. But I say to myself, I am scrolling for 15 minutes. That's what I'm going to do. I'm doing it with intention. The point being, whatever your ing is, to try and give your attention to it intentionally and solely. So do scrolling or watching, not scrolling and watching. Do cooking or listening, not cooking and listening. By doing this, you will find that you experience yourself much more completely in the moment. It brings you into the now much more than what we're doing at the moment. Many of us, a lot of the time, is to try and do multiple things at the same time. We have the radio on while we're cooking, while we're chatting. Try and minimize the number of things that we are doing in that sense. And finally, we're going to talk about balance in this moment. We're none of us perfect, and I'm certainly not perfect. It's part of the reason why I learn about these things is to educate myself. But if you find yourself lost in emotions or thoughts or feelings or anything else, there is one super powerful way that you can bring yourself back to yourself, and that is with the breath. Breathing intentionally is a really simple and powerful way to help you to bring balance. And I am going to teach you one technique that you can use in any place, in any time, in a moment. Are you ready to try it? This is super simple. This is all you do. I'm going to talk you through it, and then you can practice it, okay? So you take a deep breath, ideally through the nose. Without exhaling, you take a top-up breath. You hold for a few seconds, and then you breathe out long and slow. And if you want to get the pace just right, you imagine you are flickering the flame of a candle, but not quite blowing it out. And then you repeat. So this is how it goes. Are you ready? You go like this. Now, I'm not going to keep that going. I have reasonably large young lungs, and I've practiced this a lot, so I can keep that out breath going for a long time. But what this does, and I encourage you to practice it, is it does a couple of things that are really, really important. It has an effect on your nervous system, and it also lowers your heart rate. So in terms of bringing you out of a stressful situation, you can do that anyway. You can do it while driving your car, as long as you're careful and you don't shut your eyes and you don't overdo it. I've done it in lots of different circumstances. So there we go. That's it for the talk. What you've experienced here is a little window into the way that I do my work. It's a mixture of coaching, psychology, non-dual understanding, and neuroscience. One of my clients gave me one of my favorite quotes of all time, which is, "It's like learning a new way of life." And what I think they were getting at there is the know yourself bit that I alluded to before. that is pretty distinctive, and it allows people who I work with to really get to understand who they are before they set a path for the next phase of their life. And just so you're aware, I'm about to launch something brand new, which is entirely designed around the needs of men in the middle part of life. It's going to be called the Hero Program. It's launching in September, and there are only going to be 8 places available. So if you might be interested in that, the place that I'm going to launch it first is through something called Mentor. This is an online community for professional men that I created recently, and it's a wonderful space where we have really good conversations about who we are, what we want to be, how we're going to improve, and how we're going to support one another. It's a genuinely welcome, open conversation that we have about what it is to be a man in the middle part of life and how we can support each other to be the best version of ourselves that we can. So in order to be one of those 8 members, you first need to join the Mentor group. I've already dropped the link to the Mentor group underneath the LinkedIn Live thing here. So if you click that, you can get direct access to the group. And then in a week or so, you'll find out more about the Hero Program. But even if you're not interested in that, I'd love to welcome you into the group anyway. It's been a fantastic opportunity for me to learn from other men and to support one another as well. So there we go. That's it. Thank you very much for paying attention. This is my website. You can find me at stephenlockcoaching.com if you want to send me a message, or you can send me a direct message through LinkedIn as well. It's been an absolute pleasure putting this together. I hope you found it useful. In a day or two, this will appear on YouTube and Spotify as well. So thank you very much, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the day.